CGQ Plus.
All right, so before we get started talking about the flashback topic for today, I have something else kind of cool to discuss quickly. A few weeks ago, I got a postcard from somebody, a guy named Marcelo down in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Marcelo actually sent me a few other packages full of some stuff that I don't want to talk about right now just because I'm going to make a special episode for that. But after the packages showed up, he sent me a postcard, as I said. And for anyone that doesn't know, that is Seninha, which is like a little cartoon character, like child version of Ayrton Senna, the race car driver. And, most people, whenever I wear this hat, it's like a dog whistle for motor racing fans and Brazilians because they realize I'm a Senna fan. So Marcelo sent me this postcard, and it kind of gave me this idea. I wanted to send him back a postcard just because I thought it would be cool. And at first, I was just going to go get a postcard from my hometown or something and send that down there. And I thought, well, that's not really very creative. And so then I got the idea of like, well, I have this cool artwork that I got Steve Nazar to draw for me, so maybe I should have some postcards made up. So that's what I did. I had these postcards made up from that Vista print place. That's not like a paid plug. It just happens to be where I got it. But, I got front and back there. I got these postcards made, and I thought it would be cool to start like a postcard club. So I already posted about this on Twitter, on Instagram, but basically the deal is, I don't know where they are, way over there. I had 100 of these printed up, and what I thought would be cool would be to just basically offer these to anybody that wants one, and all you have to do is send me a postcard from just wherever you live. Like, send me a postcard from your hometown or home state or home country, and I'll send you a postcard back anywhere in the world. And so I mentioned that on social media, I think last Sunday or something, and I already got a bunch of stuff in the mail, so I just thought it would be cool to just quickly kind of go over some of this stuff. The first one I got was from this guy Mike up in Salem, Oregon, not to be confused with Mike in Portland, Oregon. And he actually sent me a whole pack of postcards, which, that's cool. It's from his hometown. I don't know if anybody recognizes this publisher. Like, they make those historical picture books and stuff. They started making postcards. There's like 15 postcards from Salem, Oregon in here. I thought that was pretty cool. The next one I got here is from Dustin in West Caldwell, New Jersey, which I only recognize because The Sopranos takes place in North Caldwell, New Jersey. And you see it's like a Beatles postcard, but it's actually from the Beatles rock band. So Dustin, I think, had no way of knowing this, but I'm actually a pretty big Beatles fan. But then, of course, he still kept it video game related. And I'm not going to read people's postcards just because I don't know if they sent them with the understanding that I was going to read what they say. But that's pretty cool. Somehow this one didn't even get postmarked. That's kind of odd. But yeah, he drew because he says here at the bottom, "I suck as an artist." Not if you're able to tell if you can see that, but. He drew like Pac-Man and the ghosts right there. So that's definitely really neat. Next, we've got this one. So this guy's not getting a postcard because he didn't want to give his name and address. It just says postcard and letter inside it. So it's anonymous from Madison, Indiana. And he sent me a letter, which, like I said, I'm not going to read it. But he sent a postcard that he made, which is he drew a Game Boy. So that's pretty cool, I think. And it just says Madison, Indiana on it, and then he just signed it anonymous. But, that's cool. It makes me feel bad I can't send you a postcard, but so I'll just thank you here, I guess. And then I got, this was kind of a weird thing to get in the mail, and obviously thank you to the person that sent this in. So I don't want to seem like I'm being ungrateful, because I'm not. This was extremely generous of you. But someone with the initials TD in Raymond, New Hampshire, just sent me 2 money orders for $3 each. And each money order just has the subject of one of my videos on it. One says Nintendo Power Issue 1, and the other says Game Pro issue 4. So I guess that's because I don't take Patreon. I guess I don't want to really like encourage people to do this because it's really not necessary, but it's definitely appreciated. And TD, your $6 will get reinvested in the show. I can probably use that to like buy another magazine or something. And then lastly, I thought this one was pretty cool. This comes from a guy named Britt in Portland, Oregon, and he sent me inside an envelope. He sent me this card, and I got to try to cover up his address with my finger here. But he sent me a QSL card, and I couldn't believe that I actually know what this is. So a QSL, I'm probably not going to explain it right, but a QSL card is a card that like radio enthusiasts can send to other radio enthusiasts, or back in the day would send to radio stations. And basically the card just means like, I received your signal, and you would put like where you are and what time and what frequency, etc. And you would send in the card. And the only reason I know about this is I was reading the Wikipedia article about WWV, which is the government's shortwave station for the atomic clock in Colorado. But I mean, again, trying to cover up his address here. But so this guy has his own QSL card, and you can see it says, confirming QSO with CGQ, and then you put the day, the month, and the year. So he sent this or he filled it on April Fool's Day, and then the time, and then of course you have the frequency and whatnot there. But obviously I'm on YouTube, so but then he even puts on here transceiver, YouTube, and then antenna, DSL. So I got kind of a kick out of that, only because, like I said, I know what it is, even though I'm not really into, I'm not a radio amateurist or whatever. But I definitely thought that was cool. So anyway, all of these are going to go into the Derek box, which is the box that Derek, drew Mega Man characters on and mailed to me. So that's becoming the box now that all the postcards and whatnot are going to go into. And just again, if you'd like a postcard, just send one into the show, and I will put the address down in the video description. So last Sunday, this is going to be boring probably, but last Sunday, for some reason I had this weird hankering. I really wanted a hot dog and a cheap beer. And I think at least partially that's because we used to have this place around here called Capital Dog, where you could get like all manner of hot dogs, and then they had lots of beer choices, but they had like cheap beers too. Like you could get like a Pabst or an Olympia or whatever. And so I used to love going in there from time to time, and I'd get like a big Chicago dog, and I'd get an Olympia beer. And that place closed down. And for some reason I just really wanted one. And all we really have around here where I live is Wiener Schnitzel. So I drove over to Wiener Schnitzel, and I bought like 4 hot dogs, because 2 for me, 2 for my wife, and then I washed it down with a Miller Lite. But it reminded me of back in like 6th or 7th grade, where often I'd be hanging out at Jonathan's house, and it was pretty frequent that on a Friday or a Saturday evening they would order out food, and usually it was either pizza. Or I don't know if any of you guys remember Kentucky Fried Chicken used to sell these things called Chicken Littles. This would have been in like 88, 89. I don't know when they stopped. But they looked like the burgers from White Castle. Like they were about the same size and they were square. But instead it had a little tiny fried chicken patty in it. And I think the only other things that were on it were like some chopped iceberg lettuce and like some mayonnaise or something. And they were like $1, which back then was cheap. Like I know now we're all used to dollar menus at fast food places, but around this time that really wasn't the case. So you could go in there and get like 3 or 4 of them or whatever, and be good to go. And that was a common thing they would get, is like the Chicken Littles. And then another common place for them to go was Wiener Schnitzel. Like his mom would go out and pick up like a whole bag full of mustard dogs, which I love mustard dogs. And Wiener Schnitzel's not bad. They steam their buns, which is, so I like, a big pet peeve of mine with hot dogs is you get a bun that hasn't been steamed and it's just not right. But anyway, just sitting there last Sunday and eating Wiener Schnitzel with my wife, it reminded me of that, because living with my mom, we didn't really eat out like ever. And, obviously I love my mom and I was glad to be living back with her, but it was not like a normal nuclear family kind of atmosphere. And so that was one of the things I enjoyed about being over at Jonathan's house, is like, like his mom would go out to Wiener Schnitzel or whatever and get food, and then everybody would sit around the dinner table and eat it. And I enjoyed kind of, being a part of that, because I didn't have that anymore. So, so eating something like that just reminds me of that, which I thought was kind of cool. But anyway, today we're going to talk about something I know I said in the last flashback, like, I don't know what I'm going to talk. Some people took it the wrong way, that somehow I wasn't going to have stories anymore, and it wasn't true. All I was saying was that I can't remember during this period of time, like, the specific sequence of video games I played, and I'm not going to lie about it. So that doesn't mean I don't have plenty of stories to still tell. So what I wanted to talk about now was that around this same time, this would have been like 6th grade, 88, 89, is really the first time I ever remember renting a video game. Now, I'd only had my Nintendo for about a year, so it's not like it was going on and I didn't know about it. But before I moved away from my dad and back with my mom, we did live across the street from a video store, and really that was the first time that I remember renting videos on like a regular basis. Like, when I was growing up, when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old, we actually had a Betamax player, because this was back in the very early 80s when Betamax and VHS were kind of neck and neck for a while. And my dad ended up getting a Betamax player, and we did rent Betamax movies, but he would just come home with that stuff. Like, he'd go to the grocery store, because some grocery stores were renting movies back then, and he'd bring something home or whatever. But it wasn't like this ritualistic thing where it's like, oh, we're all going to the video store together. And so like 5th grade or so, when we were living across the street from this video store, then I would go over there on my own. Like, maybe they'd give me some money, and I'd go over there, I'd rent a movie. Or, like, I remember there was like some high school kid probably who kind of was usually working the counter, and I kind of made friends with him because I was probably like 10 years old, and he just, I was just some little kid that was always hanging out in there. And he would always give me free soda, because they had like this little refrigerator, like tabletop refrigerator or countertop refrigerator, sitting on the counter, and it was always stocked. And as long as I didn't abuse it too much, he would let me take sodas out of there for nothing. And I remember that they had Mandarin Orange Slice. I don't know if you guys remember that. That was my favorite soda when I was a kid. Was Mandarin Orange Slice, which sadly they don't have Slice anymore. So, but anyway, they didn't rent video games at that time. So when I moved back with my mom, there was a video store like in the same strip mall as the grocery store that we would go to. And, so very often on like a Friday night, and I think this is probably the experience with most people out there, is, most commonly you'd go to the video store on like Friday night, because then you'd be renting, movies and maybe a video game for the weekend, rather than going on like a Tuesday night or something. And so, my mom and I would get in the car and we'd go to the video store. And more so, I would say, with games than with movies, you really had to get there before the rush was over, or you were just like picking over the bones. And you'd be looking at the wall where all the video games were, and anything that was even remotely like a AAA title was checked out, was gone. Like the Zelda games, or Contra, Castlevania games, etc. In that way, it was really very similar to going to Toys R Us, because you go to Toys R Us, as I've said before, same thing. Like, I don't think I ever saw Contra in stock at Toys R Us. And it was the same thing. You'd go to the video store, and you were really picking over titles that you'd maybe never even heard of, especially if you weren't reading Nintendo Fun Club News and later Nintendo Power. And in a way that's bad, and in a way it's good. If you wanted to play Contra or something, the chances are if you didn't have it, you knew somebody that did. But there were so many other games that maybe, that looks like that might be interesting. Maybe that's like a good game that just really isn't that popular. And the only way you're really going to play it was either to buy it or have it bought for you, or to rent it. So, definitely it's the case that I discovered a few games that I otherwise would not have known about if it wasn't for being able to rent games. And it's also the case that there were just a lot of games out there that really weren't worth owning, but they also weren't worth ignoring. And I think that's what gave rise to, my oft-used saying, weekend rental. Like in one of my videos, if I say, well, this game's like a weekend rental, And it's funny because a lot of people will sort of make fun of me for saying that so often. And whenever somebody does, it just really gives me the impression that like you didn't really grow up during the period of time when, you know, renting games was a common thing. Because, you know, a lot of the games that I ended up owning for the NES were not horrible games, but they were just more like weekend rental caliber, where you could get the game and spend a solid 48 hours with it, and you got what you were going to get out of that game and were ready to give it back. And so it was really kind of a stinker game to own. And but sometimes the reverse was true, and you would end up renting a game where, you know, 2 days with it, you weren't really going to get a whole lot out of it because it was really a game that you needed to have for a longer period of time. And the first example of that is actually the first game that I remember ever renting. I think this is the first game I ever rented, and that was A Boy and His Blob on the NES. And that game didn't come with instructions or anything when I got it. Now, you know, those of you who were around back in the day will know what I'm talking about, where this varied from rental store to rental store. Some places would actually just take the manual that came with the game and stick it in the little clamshell that they would send you home with. Like most often you'd get a clamshell case that looked like this. You know, it was one of these plastic, I don't know, I guess I remember this was something you could buy like at Toys R Us. You could buy these. But probably the same company that was making these to sell at toy stores or whatever, I think was probably also selling them to video stores. And so depending on where you went, sometimes you would go and, you know, you'd get the cartridge in here like this, and they would just take the manual and flop it in there and give it to you. Other places would photocopy the manual and put that in there, which is probably smarter. And other places actually got these cases that were actually like custom printed, where it would have like a printing on the back of like a one-page summary of the manual, just to give you like the basic controls, so you had an idea what was going on. But when I got A Boy and His Blob, I don't recall it coming with anything. Because the thing with that game is, you know, how many different, well, I should explain how the game works. So A Boy and His Blob, you're a boy, and you have this blob following you. Like your sidekick is this blob that like hops along. All right, so I figure it's easier just to show you guys, since I was going to do some gameplay of the other two games we're talking about in this episode anyway. So this is Boy and His Blob, and as you can see here, it was designed by David Crane. I think it's sort of well known for that. David Crane, of course, is famous as the designer of Pitfall, and then you can see here on the additional credits that Gary Kitchen sort of co-designed it. And he is just another famous game designer from the old days of Activision. So, so here, you know, the game starts out, and you know, you're the boy, and you got your blob there, and you're on kind of this riverfront, and you know, you have just like all these jelly beans, I guess, in your backpack or whatever. You know, different flavors of jelly bean, and you feed this blob jelly beans, and based on the jelly bean that you feed him, he will turn into different objects that you need in order to progress through the game. Now, I don't know if you had gotten this game with the manual, if the manual says what the jelly beans do. I mean, it's easy enough just to take notes and figure out what the jelly beans do. And I think, for the most part, they seem like they make it easier to remember, like an apple, for instance, the apple jelly bean turns him into a jack, because like Applejack. Or, you know, right now he's holding a licorice jelly bean, and that turns him into a ladder. Punch turns him into a hole, you know, because he's like punching a hole. So whatever. So you can't jump in this game. You just have your A and B button. A throws a jelly bean, and B whistles, which if you whistle at the blob, it turns him back into a blob if he was some other object. So I can still remember what it was like when I got this game, because the problem is here is it is not at all obvious what you should do. So you can see that you can run through several screens above ground on this riverfront, and then at some point we're going to run into a wall. Yeah, and so, you know, like I tried using the trampoline to jump up there, and, you know, I just couldn't figure out what to do. And you can also go back this way, and you go down some stairs, and you go into the subway. And I'm just going to play the game for a few minutes, but basically I can tell you is what happened when I rented the game when I was a kid. I just could not figure out even like the first step of what you're supposed to do. So now I'm trying to whistle and get... That's the other problem is like you're faster than the blob. Now you can turn the blob into a... I think if you feed him a coconut jelly bean, he turns into a coconut, and then you can just pick him up and carry him. And that's way easier. Oh, here we go. He got lost, I guess. All right, here we go. And then sometimes he gets this sad face, and I don't really know, like, is he hungry? I don't know what that is all about. But so we got to find the punch jelly bean. There you go. And then we're gonna feed him a jelly bean, and he's gonna turn into this hole. And then we can drop through the hole. Now I should say oh my God, I didn't know that was gonna happen. Wow. All right. I didn't know he was gonna fall through like that. So, well, at least that's something. I totally lost my train of thought. I was gonna say if you keep going on this upper floor of the subway, it just dead ends as well. And so like when I was a kid, I went up, I went down, I was like, I can't figure out where to go. And I just sort of ended up giving up and not playing the game anymore. So definitely didn't get our money's worth out of that one. So you see there, I had to move out of the way before he fell down. And then like, we can come over here and there's all this money here. And so now we feed him a licorice jelly bean. And then we can climb up there and get the money. And then there's somewhere along here, that's on this screen, where now we use another hole to drop down again. But like you see what happened, when I just died. So is that, I went through in the wrong place and I ended up getting killed. And that's kind of lame only because the only way to know that you can't go through there is to try and to get killed. And then you know that you can't go that way, which I don't think is very good game design. So we go through here and see like there was that little dude. And so now I died because there was some little enemy right there. And again, I think that's just a little bit weak. We'll try one more time. So now we'll fall through again. Yeah, see, so we hit that guy. And then like now I don't even know where to go. So now if we go this way, drop off here. So really, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, this game reminds me of Pitfall in just the way it's set up. It is a cool idea for a game. I'm not saying it's not. It's not a bad game, but I don't think it was. Maybe it just wasn't what I was expecting. See, now we're just going to die again. So anyway, I mean, that's enough of A Boy and His Blob. But anyway, so that was the first game that I rented. I also wanted to mention, I didn't mention it, when I was talking about the rental stores. Where I lived was, it was a pretty big city, I guess, but it was sort of isolated from like other major metropolitan areas. And we didn't really have any of like the national chains of anything yet. And that includes like a rental stores. Like we didn't have Blockbuster or Hollywood Video. I don't even know when those like became a thing, but like all the rental stores I went to when I was a kid were like mom and pop shops. And so they really had a limited selection of games. And so it just exacerbated the problem of if you got there too late on a Friday, you were going to end up coming home with A Boy and His Blob. So anyway, that's A Boy and His Blob. So now back to the other part of me talking. I don't ever hear anybody say that it's a bad game. I don't think it's like a AAA title on the NES, but it's a decent game and, decently regarded game. But, it's the kind of game you had to spend, I think, more time with in order to really get any enjoyment out of. And so I remember being a little bit disappointed with it, I would say, just in that it was not a good game to rent. But what I remember is that I think I had like 3 or 4 games to choose from because, it was probably like 7:30 at night by the time we got to the rental store and, everything was taken. But, when you went to a rental store, for me at least, just to be able to get a game at all was cool, because, I always thought like, looking back on it, like $10 is like the threshold for what at my age I could have realistically, spontaneously asked somebody for and had any expectation that I would get it. You know, meaning that you go to the toy store and you could say, hey mom, can I get a little Lego set? You know, like a little $5, $6, $7 Lego set. You had a pretty good chance that you could get it, you know. Or you could go to the video store and, oh, hey, can I get a game? And like more often, what did a game cost back then to rent? I feel like it was like $2.99, $3.99, and you'd get like a 2-day rental, right? So you'd rent it on a Friday night and you'd have to take it back to the store sometime on Sunday. So that wasn't like a tough sell. You know, you go to the store, you could maybe even get a movie and a video game for the weekend, especially if you had like a sleepover. You know, if your friend was coming over to spend the night, then you could almost certainly get a game and a movie. But for instance, if you and your parents went to Toys R Us for some reason and it wasn't your birthday or Christmas and you wanted to get a game, you know, purchased for you, that wasn't, at least in my experience, that wasn't going to happen. So my point is, like, you didn't go look at the wall of games to see if there was something you wanted and then go ask if you could get a game. You just, like, as soon as you got there, can I get a game? And if they said yes, you were going to grab anything. So anyway, the next game I wanted to talk about, this is actually one of my favorite games on the NES, but it actually, for me, kind of has a cool memory for some reason. So sometime, I want to say this was 7th grade when I got this game. I ended up getting this TV. Now, before this, I had a TV in my room, but it was like a black and white. It wasn't 13 inches. It was like 11. I'm looking down because I have a 13-inch PVM down here, but it wasn't that big. It was like maybe an 11-inch TV, black and white. You know, it had the dials. Like, it had the VHF dial and the UHF dial, chunk, 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 chunk to change the channel, you know. And you know, it only had the 2 screws on the back. I always forget if that's the 300 ohm or the 75 ohm. It doesn't matter. That's what I had in my room. And I could watch, and it had the 2 rabbit ears sticking up out of it. And you know, I'd use that just to watch TV. I could watch, you know, cartoons in the morning or whatever. And sometimes I did hook my Nintendo up to it and play in black and white, just because it was better than nothing. Like, when I was living with my mom, she had a TV in her bedroom, but we didn't have a TV out in the living room because we really didn't watch TV much at all. Like, my mom was really into music, and so like there was always music playing in the house, which was cool. But we didn't have a TV like set up in like the, you know, living room, family room, den, whatever. And so if she wanted to watch TV in her room or watch a movie, I wasn't playing Nintendo, and so I would just take it in my room and I'd hook it up to this black and white TV. But sometime around like 7th grade, somebody gave my mom like this, I want to say it was like a 25-inch TV, but you have to remember I was just a little kid, so even like a 20-inch TV to me probably seemed huge. It was really probably a 20-inch TV. And the problem with it was that something was wrong with the tuner so that you couldn't tune in any UHF stations, which, I don't know, people who don't understand VHF, UHF. VHF was channel 2 through 13, 14, and then UHF was like 18 through 60 something or whatever. And where I lived, all of our stations were UHF. So it's kind of funny, you know, the Weird Al movie UHF, great movie in my opinion. The whole thing with that is that the big network, you know, stations are on VHF, and the UHF is for like the little indie low budget stations. But where I lived, it was all UHF. So for where I lived, this TV was useless because you couldn't tune in any stations on it at all, but it would still tune in VHF. And what's important about that is that means that I could still set it to channel 3 and I could still turn on my Nintendo and it would work. So basically I had like this dedicated 20-inch gaming monitor for all intents and purposes in my room. And I remember while I had that set up, I remember going and renting this game, which, like I said, this is one of my favorite games on the NES. This game was also released on the PC Engine and is also a good port. In my opinion, the NES version is better. Also a really good arcade game, and that is Life Force. Life Force is sort of the follow-up, I guess, to Gradius. It's not a sequel, but, you know, it was the next game in the series. I talked about it in the video I uploaded, the Super Nintendo in 1991 video. I love Life Force, And I remember playing it on that TV and just having a good old time with it. I could say a lot of stuff about Life Force, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just edit into this part of the video. I'm just going to sit and sort of do an abbreviated Let's Play, because this Life Force is a good enough game that it deserves to get some proper attention and not just me standing here yakking about it. So let's go check out a little quick Let's Play of Life Force. All right, so next we're going to check out Life Force here. Like I said, whenever I play Life Force, the first thing I think about is having that cool TV set up in my room. I couldn't care less that I couldn't watch TV on it. To me, it was just cool to have a nice big TV to play Nintendo on. So let's just go ahead and get started. So like I was saying, Life Force is like the follow-up to Gradius, not really a sequel. Let's start over. So I'm using an EverDrive there. You have to kind of play the first part of this first level really aggressively if you want to get all the power-ups. Now, in the arcade version and also the PC Engine version, the power-up system works differently than Gradius. You just pick up power-ups that literally give you whatever that power-up is going to give you. So it's more like a traditional shooter in that sense. Whereas for this home version, I think I just took laser twice. It's hard trying to talk and play. For this home version, they made it more like Gradius, right? Where you just get like the little icons and it moves the little meter across on the bottom of the screen so that you can upgrade your ship in whatever way you want. In the arcade, the game has speech, which sounds really cool. I showed a little bit of it in the intro to that Super Nintendo video I was talking about. But take the force field here. It's hard because the camera is in the way of the meter, so I'm having a hard time seeing what my power-up option is. Because we should be trying to pick up options instead. In my opinion, I don't want to say it's the absolute best. I think it might be the best shooter on the NES. It's this or Gradius. They're both so good. Obviously, the Nintendo is not a system that's known for shooters. I feel like I'm wasting a lot of my power-ups here. The music is definitely cool. When I was a kid, I just remember thinking it was so cool, the sort of the biological theme of the game. Apparently the setup is supposed to be that you are basically fighting your way through like the interior of like some kind of being, which definitely makes sense. I mean, like these look like veins. Much like Gradius, in this game it really hurts. How did I die? It really hurts when you die, so I guess that was sort of appropriate that I died right there. Losing all of your power-ups, you really feel like you're starting over from scratch. Man, I'm really playing badly. You'll have to take my word for it. I'm not usually this bad at this game, but I just really wanted to show some gameplay anyway. These sections here, like these big... Well, I'll show you in a second here when we start going through it. Jeez Louise. Like this whole section right here, like when I was a kid, always reminded me of like raw hamburger meat. So kind of gross, but I think the game is supposed to be kind of gross. So anyway, I mean, I'm not exactly putting on a clinic here, which is unfortunate, but again, it's just hard playing this game and talking at the same time. But now we're here at the boss, which hopefully I can get rid of. I really just wanted to show you the first and second level, just so you can see them. Music in this game is also really cool. I really like the boss battle music. If you like this game and you have a TurboGrafx 16 with an EverDrive or a PC Engine, you should definitely check out the PC Engine version. Unfortunately, that game never came out here. I don't know why, because both Gradius and Life Force came out on Turbo Chip on the PC Engine, but for whatever reason, they chose not to release either of them here. And then you wonder why, oh, Jesus Christ. You wonder why the TurboGrafx 16 didn't do well here. All right, we might not make it past here. I might have to just play through it again. See, normally I'd have like lasers and a couple of options right now, and then you can actually kill the boss pretty quickly. There we go, we beat him. So I just wanted to show you the second stage here because it switches over from being horizontally scrolling to vertically scrolling, which is pretty neat. And then of course you get a bunch more of these dudes coming down so that you can get more power-ups, which at this point we desperately need. So now we got 1 speed power-up and missiles. Usually I like 2 speed power-ups. That's pretty good speed for me. So now we got lasers. Sometimes when I'm getting ready to go to work in the morning, I like to fire up a game of some kind real quick just because it kind of gets my mind going and gets me sharp. And this is one of the games I'll often pick for that. But anyway, so that's Life Force. Like I said, I just have really cool memories of sitting on the floor in my room on my little area rug in front of that TV I was talking about and playing the game. Definitely an awesome game that I would love to be able to talk about more, in depth, like on an episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly. So, all right, now back to the other part of the video. All right, now to a certain extent, I would say that Life Force made for a good rental in that it was a good game, but I didn't have the gaming chops where you were going to give me Life Force for 48 hours and I was going to beat it and be ready to give it back. Like Life Force back then was worth owning. Anyway, the third game that I'm going to talk about, I think this game to me is a perfect weekend rental. And this game I didn't rent until I was in probably 8th grade. And that was with my friend Stuart, which we haven't really talked about Stuart yet. But Stuart and I were big computer gamers. But we both had Nintendos. And this would have been like 1990, 1991. And it was the same old song and dance. Like his dad, would say, hey, we're going to the video store. And so, of course, we went with him. And what did we ask? As soon as we got in there, can we get a game? And so we ended up renting this game and having a pretty good time with it. And that is Marble Madness. Marble Madness is a really good game. But at least for me, you spend a couple days with it and you're just kind of done. Obviously, this is an arcade port. In the arcade, it's got a trackball, which is pretty neat. And obviously, you're not going to get that at home. But, it only has a handful of levels, so the game is very repetitive. Obviously, you can shave your time down so that you can get a better score. But at least for me, this is not the kind of game that I'd want to sink my teeth into to the point that I would want to own it. So, perfect weekend rental game. And that's not to say, when I say a game's a weekend rental, that's not a disparaging remark. It's just, a game can be good, but you play it for a couple of days and you've gotten your fill of it, and so you don't need to own it. So it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just like, it's good for a couple of days of fun, and then you're just done with it. I think this game is awesome, but you play it for 2 days solid and there's just nothing left. So, but anyway, we can just check out some quick gameplay of this one as well. I love the music. It does have pretty good graphics, got nice controls. So let's just quickly check out Marble Madness. All right, so last here we've got Marble Madness. Like I said, this started out in the arcades. It was an Atari arcade game. In the arcade, you had like a trackball that you used to move the marble around. This game was ported to pretty much every gaming platform known to man. It was ported to home computers by Electronic Arts. And then this Nintendo version was actually ported by Rare. And Marble Madness was designed by a guy named Mark Cerny. It was like one of his first, or maybe his first major success. He became more well-known, I would say, in the PlayStation days for working on Crash Bandicoot and some other games. But anyway, let's get started here. So I'm not going to enter my name. You can select if you want 45 or 90 degree control type. I don't really know the difference. Probably the coolest thing about this game to me, I shouldn't say that, but it's just a cool idea for a game, just the way it works. It's very like MC Escher-esque, the way the levels are designed. But I just always was blown away by the game's music. And it was one of the first soundtracks that I ever remember hearing somebody cover. like a fan. Like, you know, you had like the mini bosses back in the day, and I can't remember the person's name, but there was some guy. This must have been at least 15 years ago, who was doing a lot of Nintendo covers on the piano, and I remember him doing like the main theme of Tetris, and then I think he did all the music for Marble Madness, so that was pretty cool. You know, as you can see, you know, the idea with this game is basically that you're running through like an obstacle course and, you know, getting your ball through there. It kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, I had one of those wooden labyrinth things where you had like the little, oh man, this part is really hard to get through. Oh, wow. You know, where you had like the two dials that you could use to tilt the tabletop of the labyrinth one way or the other. You know, and then I just had like a little steel ball bearing or something in there. It's something my aunt had given me. And so I remember when I first played this game, it reminded me of that. And I know I talked about this game during a magazine read through. I really couldn't say which one. But like I said there, it was one of these games where, you know, it's the kind of thing that your parents would be happy to see you playing because, you know, oh boy. You know, it's funny to think about it now because video games have gotten so much more violent. But, you know, there was a time when parents had like misgivings about kids playing like Super Mario Brothers because like you were bouncing on the heads of these creatures and killing them. And so it's like, oh, that's, you know, that's so violent, which, you know, of course it isn't, but if we're gonna be able to make it. Oh. What happened? Oh, I'm getting some bonus time. That's nice. The little wand gives you some bonus time. Oh, there we go. All right, get through there. I think this game had, I don't remember how many levels I said I thought it had, but it's got 6, I'm pretty sure. So that's not too bad, but you know, like I said, I just feel like this is a very cool game, but I'm just not sure like what you're really going to do with it after you've had it for a few days. See, like that part right there, the little flingy thing, I remember having something like that on that little labyrinth that I had. Goodness. Oh man. Well, I got some bonus time on the way down. Sometimes it's just hard to see where you are. See, I think here you have to like get like launched off of this thing. Come on. All right, I feel like this might be where we're gonna eat it because you have to like basically let this thing throw you over to the other side. I shouldn't have gone this way, but it's kind of too late now. So, but I mean, you guys get the idea of how the game works. Like I said, I mean, it's a really cool game, and I would love to play it in the arcade. I've never seen an arcade cabinet of this game that I know of. Yeah, all right, so game over there. You know, because you run out of time there. You know, you get to carry over your time from the previous levels, but you know, we just ran out there, and then you just, and if you get to the 6 levels, if I remember correctly, you just start over again. But you know, this was a game that we rented, Stuart and I, just because, you know, we went to the video store with his dad and he said we could get something. And so we grabbed this, and it was just something different than either playing computer games on his computer, or he only had a couple of Nintendo games. So anyway, that's Marble Madness. Definitely a cool game. Worth picking up now because it's a cheap game, but, you know, back then I wouldn't have wanted to pay $50 for it. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of Flashback. I've got another video that I'm working on for this channel that's going to be talking about the TurboGrafx 16 and isn't going to be any kind of flashback kind of thing. It's just sort of an idea that I came up with that I'm going to try out on this channel. So I am still sort of in the process of, I mean, I'm not writing it because it's not going to be scripted, but just kind of going through and making notes and making sure I talk about the things I want to talk about. So I can't really say when that episode is going to come out. And then as I said at the end of the Let's Read video that I uploaded on the other channel, I've got a few videos that I'm working on for that one. Just once again, if you would like a postcard, which of course now I don't have to hold up again, If you'd like a postcard, just like I said, send a postcard into the show, no matter where you are, anywhere in the world. And I already bought stamps, both domestic and international, so I will get one back out to you in the mail. So that's going to do it for this episode of Flashback. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.